Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Oldham, and I am the founder of Mahdlo, where we have been providing strategic sales and marketing advisory services to CEOs at some of the biggest brands since 2005. Today, I am joined by Allison Farmer, who is our newest advisor here at Mahdlo. And Allison focuses on executive coaching and has deep experience in this area. She's been working in this area for over 20 years. Allison, thank you so much for joining. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. I've been looking forward to it.
And me too. All right. Well, so just to kick off really quick and set the stage, when we go in to advise clients on their sales and marketing challenges, many times we see that they're having issues in one of the four key areas, right? So number one would be alignment. Number two, process delivery. Number three, MarTech enablers or technology. And number four is typically organizational design or organizational agility. And since that's what we're focusing on today, let's kick off with that one. So let's talk about how important organizational agility is to any company and how building talent internally is the most effective way to build a culture for growth. What do you think, Allison, are some of the barriers that you find with building great cultures at any company?
Sure. So great cultures in any company. Thinking about that, a couple of things, and I'm even going to go back one step, which is organizational agility in my mind, to sort of frame that piece, is about having an organization that responds quickly and we're seeing right now why it's so important. Things are changing rapidly, so you need to have a team of folks that can pivot, as we keep hearing everybody talk
Yeah,
about.
absolutely.
So just even thinking about, like, why are we pursuing organizational agility? It's because we need to remain relevant to what's happening in the market. And the way to do that is by creating a culture that allows that and encourages that agility. And so going back to your question, what are the barriers of creating a great culture that are going to stand in the way of that agility? So one, I think you need to start with the leadership. We often talk about how the people create the culture, and I agree with that. It's everybody, everybody who shows up and how they show up contributes to the culture. But really, you have to think about the leaders as creating the container for that culture. It is in what they allow, what they encourage, what they promote. All of that creates a container that is sort of this implicit place that culture comes from. So barriers is, the leadership team. They need to think about it and be intentional about what they're setting out to create. That said, there's no recipe for a perfect culture, and they can't sit in a strategy meeting and say, this is going to be our culture, and roll it out like an initiative.
If only it were that easy.
Right? So yeah, I wave my wand and here's your culture. No, they can come up with the container and what they stand for and all that. The pieces that go into that is they need to have a vision, mission, values really clearly defined. So I'd say that's one of the barriers, is if you don't have that, it's really hard for people to know where they're moving, and it takes away a lot of the empowerment that people are going to need. Because if you're not clear on the destination, you're going to need to check in so many times for immediate feedback to make sure that you're not wandering off the path. If, however, the organization has provided you with a clear sense of where you're going, you have a lot more latitude. And that is a key thing to having a culture that leads to empowerment, that leads to agility. And then I guess the last thing that I would throw in here, and this is the piece that connects it all, is some form of open communication channel. It is where all of this breaks down. If you could have leaders creating a great container, you could have a good vision so that people know where they're marching and they're feeling really empowered to go there without a ton of check-ins. Where it all falls apart is when there's inconsistency between what people say the culture is and what the culture actually is. And I'll give you an example of that. It's one that I see come up a lot, where people talk about, the reason that I came to work here is because it has great work-life balance. We all want that. Right. And in this day and age, I think most people are often expected to be available around the clock, be super responsive. Especially right now, there's no boundary to our work days, really. It's sort of 24/7 accessibility. So that might be at odds with work-life balance.
Mm.
And if there's not a communication channel where people at the senior level aren't hearing from the field saying, whoa, whoa, you're talking about this wonderful work-life balance, but here my reality doesn't reflect that.
Yeah.
That's when you start to get a little bit of a fissure in the culture, and that can crack and erode the foundation. So I think those three things are so critical. It starts with leadership, it's getting clear on the vision, mission, values, and goals, and then it is third in creating a culture that's listening, that has open communication so that they can detect when things start to break down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. So critical. So, what do you think are some of the do's and don'ts? What would you say those are?
Yeah, do's and don'ts. And I might sound a little bit like a broken record because I do think that this is, while there's probably 20 different things that we could focus on, there are three that I just see repeatedly people need to do. It's starting with a strong foundation and going back, and why do I keep harping on this foundation? It is, if you think about agility, for an organization to really function successfully as an agile organization, you need both speed and a stable foundation. And
Yes.
so that's where all of this falls apart if you don't have a strong foundation. And when I think about that foundation, it's the vision, mission, values piece that I mentioned. It's strong leaders. So I really advocate investing in leaders, especially if you're going to try to have an empowered field. You need leaders who are good at managing to results, not to tasks. And we're seeing, especially as people are trying to manage more and more remotely, the management by walking around or just knowing what's going on, that's not effective, it's not productive, and it's also not very empowering. So I think that's the second piece in this, is have a strong leadership team, invest in them and help them continue to improve their game around managing to results. And then, broken record time, communication, create those channels. And I want to be specific there because I think, a lot of times, I get the open communication. That's important. We do that. We have an annual survey. We hear from our employees. Have you noticed how quickly our world is changing? If you're waiting once a year, you're really missing an opportunity. And any sort of formal mechanism like that, I don't know, call me cynical, but I tend to think that people are a little guarded, or you're not getting the type of feedback that can be really helpful. And that's where I think, again, going back to that second point, strong leaders make the difference. They can, if they have good leadership who listen, who engage, and who ask curious questions, they're going to have a really good read on the field, how happy they are, how engaged they are, and where there's a disconnect between what the company says it wants as its culture and what people are actually experiencing as employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes. So open communication for sure, as we've talked about before. And I do agree with you with the surveys once a year. They definitely, especially now in today's environment, need to be happening much more frequently because of just how quickly things are changing.
Right.
When we talk about agility, it's funny because, they say it rhymes with stability, and exactly what you said, having the strong foundation is so critical. So
Yeah. I love it when things rhyme.
yeah, I do too. Easier to remember. Agility
Absolutely.
rhymes with stability. All right. So lastly, what do you think is the biggest mistake that CEOs make when it comes to cultivating a culture for growth?
Sure. So I don't cherish telling anyone they're making a mistake, but sometimes you need to share a little tough love to help people see where they're getting in their own way. And I think that one thing that I see across organizations is the pursuit for speed. It's almost like sometimes you can get speed blinders where it comes from a good place of wanting to adapt, stay relevant, all the things that we've talked about. However, it needs to be on that foundation of stable foundation. And so I think it can be a little bit like, how a lobster has lopsided claws. There's one that's like huge because
Yeah.
it's overworked. I
Yeah.
think about that a lot when I think about, where CEOs are putting their time and energy. Oftentimes the sexy fun part is the agile part. It's dealing with innovation, the new stuff that's coming up. That becomes that overworked lobster claw. And if they're not continuing to pay attention to ensuring a really strong, solid foundation that's stable, if they're not investing in employees, in their leaders, and making sure that those basic pieces are in place, it's going to crash and burn if you're just trying to hit the gas pedal.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So not having speed for speed's sake, right?
Right, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Allison. I really appreciate it. And just to recap really quickly, so barriers, we talked about open communication is critical in any organization. You mentioned strong leadership, which I think is also very critical. Some of the do's and don'ts, definitely having strong leaders, investing in your leaders is critical. And making sure that they're managing to results. And then lastly, one of the biggest mistakes that you see is all around speed for speed's sake.
Well
So
said.
thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with me. I'm looking forward to continuing the partnership, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. This is fun.
Yes, it was fun. Thank you.